Good morning. So welcome to our Finance and Performance Committee meeting, and I'll ask Anne Galloway to open the meeting.
E te whanau, whaia te mātaranga, kia whai, take nā mahi katoa, tū maia, tū kaha, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou rā tātou katoa. For this gathering, we seek knowledge for understanding, to have purpose in all that we do, stand tall, be strong, and show respect for each other.
Kia ora. So we start with item 1, apologies. I've got an apology from Councillor Davidson. Mayor Dalzell has a leave of absence, and Councillor Johansson is joining us by Zoom this morning, so he's part of the meeting but he's not physically present. So I'm happy to move those apologies. Sam McDonald seconds. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Declarations of interest. There are a number of declarations of interest which have been signalled already. We would normally have those up on the screen. We're not quite able to do that at the moment. I can go through them if there's a need, but they are noted for the meeting. So, yeah, Councillor Cotter has declared an interest in item 12. Councillors Johansson and Galloway, I'm assuming that there'll be an interest in relation to the Mayor's Welfare Trust in relation to item 12.
Just on the screen now.
Oh, we've got them on the screen now, so I don't need to go through them. They're up there on the screen. That's great. All right, so we'll note those declarations of interest. If anything else arises during the meeting, please make it known.
Item 13, counter interest,
Yep, so Councillor Chen declared an interest in the section of items 13 relating to the Rickett and Bush Trust. That's the matter you're raising? Great, thank you. So confirmation of previous minutes. We've got minutes from the 2nd of July, which I'm happy to move. Can I have a seconder for those minutes, please? Melanie, all those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Public forum. There are no public forum presentations this morning. Deputations by appointment. There are no deputations by appointment. Item 6, presentation of petitions. There are none. Item 7, the performance exceptions report. Peter, I'd invite you to the table to present this report. Thank you.
Right, thank you and good morning. This report is it's the year-end performance report. It's consistent with the previous months, the 3 or 4 previous months. In short, we finished the year in terms of levels of service down about 6%, almost entirely due to COVID-related impacts. To be honest, given the extent of the lockdown and the impacts through the economy and society, a 6.5% drop for the 19-20 year is actually, I won't say good, but it's unexpectedly low. I would have anticipated the impacts to be higher. What this reflects is that council services largely continued during the lockdown, other than those areas where closure was mandatory. So the exceptions, the key exceptions, there are 1 or 2 related to unplanned interruptions on water supply, complaints per household on wastewater, passenger journey time on public transport infrastructure. These are relatively standard levels of service that are always prone and at risk anyway. So the bottom line of our levels of service for the year is that we finished well, slightly down due to COVID and with the usual suspects where the achievement of the level of service is difficult anyway. I'm happy to field questions as we go if you want to. The wrap-up on capital is much the same, and you'll get more detail from Ruth in the following report. But at a high level, looking at projects all of life, the major projects are at 65% and cycleways at 77%. Again, down slightly, mostly due to COVID impacts of being unable to construct during the lockdown. There is a list of completion date changes there, and the watch list has had some projects removed, so Riccarton Bus Priority and New Brighton Hot Water Pools, and some projects added on the Avon Corridor and some safety improvements. So standard, relatively steady set of results for the year with some COVID impact. There is an appendix there of the level of service exceptions. These will appear in the annual report. As a proportion of the overall work that Council does, these exceptions are quite small, but they are brought to Council on an exception basis. So that's the high-level view. I'd be happy to field any questions arising from that.
Thank you, Peter, for that introduction. And realising, of course, that there may be questions which are capable of being answered by Peter or other staff that are in the room. If that's not the case, then in the interest of time, what I'd be suggesting is that we would get a written answer to questions if we're not able to get a verbal answer from the people that are in the room today, although we've got an array of staff so that we are able to get answers, hopefully, where possible. So on questions, Melanie.
They're working?
That's perfect. Thank you.
So my question is about the wastewater for Helen, I suppose. Or, it says about the 95% for the wastewater network, and it's at 93.6, and we've got the shortfall in funding for the following year. I was wondering if this is one of the things that can be accelerated with the money from the government if we sign up to the MOU.
So that's the CCTV inspection of the wastewater system, is that the one that you're looking at?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, that is one of the candidates that we've put up for funding as part of the acceleration fund.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Ella.
Thank you. Any further questions on this report? No further questions. That's fine. So we've got a resolution to receive the information provided in the performance exceptions report, which I'm happy to move. Jimmy Chen will second. Any debate? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you. So now moving to item 8, the capital project performance report. And Ruth Cable, welcome to the table. Thank you for joining us. And again, as we'd said with the last report, if there are any technical questions that aren't able to be answered quickly with people in the room today, then we would provide a written memo or a written answer back to the committee. And Ruth, you'll draw attention to the additional projects that have been included and will be included in future reports.
Cool, thank you.
All right, so any introductory remarks on this one? Thank you.
Yep. Good morning, councillors. Good morning, Chair. I'll take the report as read. This is the year-end capital performance report. The data was captured at the 20th of June. On page 50, the financial year spend at 20th of June was 369. So the 20th of June cut-off for this report was prior to the final costs coming in. So we did actually see excellent progress in that for our projects in construction during June. So the actual outturn for the financial year ended up being 386. Project exceptions for the month, which you'll see from page 58 through to 60, they've been reasonably static from previously reported. There's been about 10 projects that were reported as read last month that have come off. We'll talk to COVID-19 impacts. So cost impacts, we've got approximately 6 million worth of claims. That is still the case. And at the point of writing of this report, we'd paid out 477k in both interim and finalised costs. So we've now settled 40% of the 6 million worth of claims. We will provide visibility of the finalised costs once we have assessed and finished the negotiations. We're expecting to have the majority of the claims completed by the end of August. Time impacts as a result of COVID. So in attachment D, which is your page 68, there's a number of projects there that are listed where COVID has impacted on our project completion date. So these have been provided to you for information. Of the 247 projects, so 55 of them have been impacted by COVID. And you'll see as well that where COVID is not the sole reason for delay, additional comments have been provided for that reason. I think the key message in relation to COVID impacts is that while we did obviously experience lockdown and additional restrictions, we did recover very well, and that's evidenced by the spend and the progress that we made to the end of the year with the 386 spend. In page 55, the carry forward and bringbacks. So this is the final position for carry forward into out of financial year 20. So that was a final position of 159, and we ended up moving 95 of that into this financial year to continue with our in-flight projects. With the Cycleways report, you will notice there at that time in June there were issues and risks relating to funding, particularly with our South Express and Northwest Arc cycleway routes. With the shovel-ready funding, that is no longer an issue and risk. So you'll see that come off next report. Watchlist report, the status of those projects have remained static from previously reported in May. There is confirmation requested from councillors today in relation to the finalised watchlist for 21. So as of next month, which is the July reporting period, we'll be removing projects that have been completed. And you've all had the opportunity to put forward projects of interest and high investment. We got back Horswell Junction Road Extension and Lancaster Park Development. They will enter the watch list for July reporting period along with Watakaro Avon River and Evans and Dyers Pass safety improvements. Any questions?
That's great, thank you. So those 4 projects, they'll start being reported on from the next time we see this report?
Yes, the July reporting period.
Excellent, thank you very much. And then just on the claims, $6 million of claims have been received, 477,000 has been paid out so far. Obviously, we're continuing to work through the remainder. What sort of timescale are we looking at for those? Are we expecting that to be wrapped up reasonably quickly, or are we expecting it to be a protracted process?
The estimate that I've had from the engineers' reps is that they're hoping to get the majority of them completed by the end of August. But it obviously does rely on the contractors coming back in the negotiation that's taking place.
Yeah, that's certainly something that we'll be keen to keep an eye on in future reports.
Yeah.
That's fine, thank you. Are there any further questions? Tim?
I guess the delays caused by COVID, which is totally understandable, but are they going to be soaked up as we go forward, or is it going to delay every project as we go forward? Is there going to be catch-up?
At the moment, we're trying to assess the impact in terms of the overall project. The ones that you've got on those on the attachment are the ones that have actually impacted on project delivery. So you see the revised delivery complete date on those pieces of.
But I guess there's only so many crews a company's got, so as they've been pushed back, because of COVID, when they've got a contract to do something else, that's obviously, I'm presuming, has been pushed back as well. But is there going to be an element of catch-up, and is there going to be a cost to that if there is? Instead of a 5-day week, they do a 7-day week to try and catch up, or longer hours? I mean, I don't know, but I'm just wondering, because if we've got, say, projects in our areas that have been delayed, they're quite a way out, but will they be delayed? But I guess we don't know that at the moment.
Probably don't know that at the moment. For the ones in flight, the new project delivery complete forecasts have come from the contractors themselves.
Yeah, totally get this, and it's this is really good. Thank you. So, but
the teams are looking for substitutions to fill those gaps. If you have a look at that report, you'll see some, for example, have been pushed out quite a long way because of the change of season, or we've got to go and remove a few more lizards or whatever. We will look at substitutions to fill those gaps to try and keep that full workload. At this point in time, every job we put out, we do get enough tenders through the tender box. So there is enough capacity we've found in the industry to deliver our program of everything that we've put out to date. So we will be looking to try and fill those gaps so that we continue with our spend along with your program.
And it's close to the times. Cool. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. Pauline.
Well, thank you. Just looking at page 51, and this is the completed lot. The Robert McDougall Art Gallery, the weather tightness has been completed. So can you tell me when that was and how much it cost? And you may not be able to answer that cost one today, so I'm just putting that forward.
Darren will be able to answer that.
Hi. No, I can't answer that right now. But I didn't want to yell it from back there. so happy to provide that information.
Thank you. And one more, if I may, is page 56, and we've got the, and this is something I would like to add to the watch list if I could, is the St Albans Community Centre. Now, I think it's later on in the report, I see that's not due for completion now till March 2021.
Mm-hmm.
The community has been told that it was going to be January, we know there's been delays, and it was actually supposed to be completed maybe about 18 months ago. We took away the transitional centre there, so I do feel that there is an urgency about getting this completed as quickly as possible. So I'm wondering why it's pushed out to March again now.
I think the latest date from a site visit we had yesterday was just around about the third week of February. The roofing is going on next Wednesday, so we'll have a fully weather-tight building by the end of next week. So at the moment, that was one of the projects that suffered significantly through a COVID extension of time claim as well. So we're still working through that. But at the moment, third week of February, I believe the works will be complete.
Yep, okay. So, Mr Chair, is it possible to keep a watch on that one, please?
Yep, so that's something that we can, it can come back presumably through this future iterations of this report.
Yep, no problem.
Yep.
Thank
All right,
you.
so if that's
Really
something that we can
appreciate
just keep a highlight on, thanks Pauline for raising it.
Yep.
And yeah, if we can just keep a highlight on that as we have future versions of this report brought to the committee, that would be great.
Because one of the reasons too that we need to have these dates affirmed way ahead is because we've got to start getting the bookings so they're ready to hit the ground running, and those need to be coming in now. So there's a community group going to be running that, so we really need to be diligent about keeping them informed about when the doors are going to be open.
Yep, and I think Richie, who's running that
Yep.
job's been coming monthly just about to the community board of late, so he'll continue to do that.
Lovely, thank you.
All right, thank you. Jimmy.
Thank you, Chair. On page 50, our budget for 2019-20 is the $527 million. But on page 50, we can see we up to date only to be used the $369 million. So those $158 million carry forward to this year, am I right?
Yeah, well, that was the carry forward from financial year 20, but not all of it came into financial year 21. So only 94.5 came into financial year 21.
Yes.
The rest of it has gone into future years.
So you mean following year? Okay.
Yeah.
But whether those one is due to the this page, the 53, the 55 project, either the delay due to COVID-19 or maybe 40 project due to some other reason. Am I right?
That's correct.
Okay, that's very good. But this year, the budget for new year 2020-21 is $527 million. Cover those carry forward budget.
The 501
Yes.
or 506 million budget for this financial year
Yes.
includes 94.5
Yes.
of the carry forward from last year.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you very much. Now, Yanni, you've got questions?
Yeah, thank you. Cheers. Yep, cool. Just on page 75, I see there's an Apunawai Athletics Indoor Training Facility. Have we had any reports on that? I just don't, we haven't had any visibility of that project, so I was just kind of keen to get more information about what that was. Second question was in regards to Knight's Drain. The Knight's Drain ponds which have been deferred, can we get like a memo back on what we're actually doing to address the flooding in that area and whether there's any opportunities now that we own the red zone land to save money and do it quicker and cheaper? Thanks.
Okay, so Napunawai, Darren, you can speak to that one.
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you.
That is a new facility that was built after we've completed the project. It's an indoor, very simple structure made of containers with a covered plastic roof. It's an indoor training facility for throwers, discus, shot put, etc., etc. Due to be complete in a couple of weeks' time.
Sorry, is there a report where we've signed off on it? Or is that just part of the Napunawai project?
It's part of the Napunawai project, so no report, I think. Nigel?
I think the important thing to note Athletics New Zealand are funding and paying for this entire project. We're delivering it on their behalf, and also they're paying a project management fee for that. So it's not funded by council, completely funded by Athletics New Zealand, who are paying council
Oh, great.
on their behalf.
Okay.
All right.
Fantastic.
So
Thank you.
Yeah, money's come into council, which is why it appears here it appears we're spending our money, but in fact it's come in and they've been paying invoices to date.
Could we have it in green, because it's actually one of the things that's such a profit?
Can you explain what you mean?
It was a joke, actually. So.
Oh, right, okay.
Okay, courtesy laugh.
All right, so that answers the Ngā question. Next one, Yanni, was Knight's Drain. Helen, welcome to the table. Can you make some comment on this one?
Thank you. So the Knights Drain ponds are not in the red zone area. They're across the road to the west, and they're mostly about a stormwater treatment facility rather than flooding. If you're talking about the flooding in the Bexley area, which is the red zone, we have, so in December last year, we fast-tracked the design of the Waitaki Street stop bank and the associated wetlands and stormwater treatment, which is part of the regeneration plan and part of the Otakaro Avon River corridor. That was put up for shovel-ready money, but I haven't heard anything back from that, and I suspect we're not getting it. So we are looking at what we can do in that area. It is, of course, linked to, not linked, but very close by to the replacement of the Pages Road Bridge and the realignment there. So, yeah, we're doing some further work. The design work is well advanced for the Waitaki Street area.
Thank you. Phil?
Oh, sorry, just before you move off Knight's Drain, my question was, given that we've got greater prioritisation, and I presume due to budget, now that we own the red zone land, is there an option to do that project cheaper and quicker, given that we own land just across the road now in the red zone, so that that project can proceed?
So
the Knight's Drain one.
There are two projects. So the Knight's Drain project, the design work is proceeding, and for the Waitaki Street and the associated stormwater ponds and saltwater wetlands on the other side of the stop bank, that design work is proceeding as well and is being fast-tracked. And it has since December last year.
Right, okay, so there's no benefit to using the red zone land that we now own for that project?
No.
Can I add to
Okay,
that? We
thanks.
worked on that at the
Thank
Land
you.
Drainage Working Group, and that's the best location for it where it is. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Phil?
Thank you. You said that about the cycleways are now come forward because of the shovel-ready stuff we got, which is fantastic because it's money that we didn't have and it's come from the government, which is very nice. These 2, 3 or whatever cycleways that are now full steam ahead, correct me if I'm wrong, in the LTP, these cycleways must have had some money attributed to them. Does that mean that they are now, that money will now come back to us to use on other things?
That's one. We'll get a memo back to you in the next day or so on. So I'm preparing that at the moment.
Right.
Because it came through the office of the CE.
Okay.
So I will get the information back on where it is.
So if we can get that information circulated to all committee members when it's available, that would be excellent, and thanks very much indeed. Thank you. David?
I think on that, councillors will be pretty aware our capital program going forward for the next 10 years is pretty big. So certainly the 40 million that we've got for water will actually decrease some of that. Whether you use it for something else, I'm not sure whether we can afford to do it, might help us bring us down to a line that we can afford. But certainly the shovel-ready projects around transport will help us there. Obviously the tranche 1 money that we're getting for 3 waters will help us there. The money that we got for the coastal pathway, we also had in, help me here, somewhere 26, 27, I think. So that will come out. But whether we'll be able to use that or not depends on our financial envelopes, really. So, but it will all be added into that discussion when we prioritise capital.
And of course, realising that the additional funding for water is subject to decision making on the 25th.
Correct.
I don't think we should be kind of grabbing money that we don't have yet and haven't agreed to take.
Yeah. Pauline?
Well, just on page 71 with the Richmond Hill footpath, and that looks like it's turned into quite a large project now. I remember we suggested bringing that forward to align with works that were happening around that area anyway, but now this is turned into consultation, design, complex design related to being on a narrow hill road adjacent to properties, and it's not due for completion until April 21. So has that ended up to be a much bigger project than we first thought when we sort of pushed it forward?
It's not bigger than we expected when we put it into the annual plan. It is a complex project because it is on a steep site, and it is reasonably difficult, and there's a very well engaged community up there, so we have been engaging with them well. So it's not worse than we expected when it went in. It was always a $500,000 project to put the footpath up there anyway. Costs aren't blowing out or anything like that. So,
and the reason we did it was because there was other works going on in the area, wasn't it?
There's resurfacing works going on in the area, yes.
So have they finished?
I can't answer that one. I'll have to come back to you on that. I'll give you an update via the same memo that I'm putting together.
Because does that mean because this is delayed till next April and it was supposed to be finished last June of this year, then the other works are also delayed?
I can't answer that. Sorry, not off the top of my head. I will.
It's just an interesting case because we do talk about synergy and trying to do the works together, but it seems to me it might not have worked in this instance. I'm not sure. Okay.
Let's get some written information on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynette.
All right. Are there any further questions, Aaron?
Yeah, just a couple on page 65. So Lynette, you're probably going to be the answerer of these ones. So firstly, the Northern Line cycleway, there's no delivery dates in there for section 2B or not to be, 3A and 3B.
Northern.
That's
yes,
like Starks to Barnes.
Yes, they are actually still in concept, so we're still doing the planning for those, but they are well advanced. So that you will get some dates, as Ruth alluded to, with the information, with the announcement about the funding.
Yeah.
You will get some dates in the next report.
Oh, okay. And yeah, because there's the one that's in red there, which is due to Kiwi Rail, but I thought all the rest of those were as well.
They are effectively, they're all in the same boat. We're having the same discussion along the whole route with Kiwi Rail, and that's progressing quite well at the moment.
Okay, cool. So that's that one. And then on the surprise, next page, on the wheels to wings, yes. Sections 1, 2 and 3, yes. Is there a section 0.5? That is, because those are March 25, 27 and 28.
Yes.
But
so,
is there the...
So this was...
Written before.
Yes.
Thank you.
So this will come through in the next one as well.
Changes. Thank you.
Yep.
I'm looking forward to those number changes.
So am I.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Now, Yanni, you've got a further question.
Yeah, thank you. Just in regards to the cycleways, I had two questions. One was, when we get the memo back about the financial impacts, are we going to get anything from central government over, is there anything in writing from central government over what they've agreed to?
At the moment, the only information that we have is the information that you have. So as soon as we have it, we will pass it on.
Thank you.
So in Newsline story, is that all we've got?
The only information that we've got is the media release that we passed on to you via the Newsline story. Yes.
Okay. And then just in terms of the Heathcote Expressway, the Tannery to Martindale's, where you've got, I mean, there's several comments in here, but there's a reference to the lizard habitat and possible delay.
Yep.
I just was trying to understand, in terms of the funding that's been made available and the delay for the lizard habitat, how that kind of fits together.
So the lizard habitat is a bit like the whitebait habitats that we have to work around. We have seasonal times when we can work. Doesn't mean that all of the work has to stop across the entire route. It just means that there's sections of the route that we can't build in a certain season. So we have to just program appropriately to make sure we don't build within an exclusion season. So that's how we're working that with the lizards. And there's a section where there's whitebait spawning zone as well, so we can't work in that area in that season.
So is there going to, final question just on this, is there going to be a comprehensive report around the cycleways going forward in terms of financial, but also delivery and decision making? So we're really clear about, what decisions still need to be made and what the financial impacts are? Or are we just going to get a memo?
I'm not sure what sort of report you're asking for there, Councillor, sorry.
So I would have thought things like design, who's making the decisions around the detailed design for the routes, when those decisions are likely, what the conditions of the funding are from central government, etc.
As soon as we have the information about the conditions of funding from central government, we'll pass it on to you. We don't have it at the moment.
Right.
The memo that I send you about the routes that are impacted by this by the funding that's been announced from central government, I can put on that the current status of those routes and where the decision making is. All of the cycleways projects are metropolitan projects, so the decision making is made by the Urban Development Committee.
Right. But we're going to have a huge amount of work to do in a short time, aren't we, with the government funding that's been made available? So I think just having good visibility of what those impacts are and how we are going to progress it would be really, really important.
So it should be noted by the committee that all there's a couple of routes that have consenting issues, but all of the routes that government has funded through the shovel-ready money have got design sign-off. It's already done for all of them, so they are really shovel-ready projects.
All right, so obviously there's further information to come once you've got that information. Yep. If we can get that circulated once you've got it, yep, then that'll be perfect. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Cheers.
Great, thank you very much. No further questions? Jimmy.
Regarding those major cycleway, the schedule in here, I'm not sure. For instance, like a South Express, you have a current approved delivery date, current forecast delivery date. There's many focus on detailed design or it's a completion opening date on page 66.
The dates are the completion dates.
Completion date.
Construction completed.
Okay, if completion date, but based on your amber signal, probably is a severe delay. Am I right?
So the final column, it relates to risk only. So it's the classification for risk as amber.
Yes.
At that point, based on the fact, whatever is written there, previously confirmed subsidy, awaiting the subsidy.
Yeah. So probably
so it's risk related. It's not an issue. It hasn't happened.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, but probably will be the severe behind the schedule because even your detail one, you have not subsidies from the NZTA and also the construction. Not yet. Still need to waiting for.
So since this report was written, the approval's been received, and we're due to go. We're going out to tender on the first round, or it's out to tender right now. It's about in that period. We're due to go out right now, so the delays have been mitigated. That will turn green now.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we've got a resolution in front of us to receive the information in the report. And obviously this is where we confirm the projects to be included in the watch list for this financial year. I'm happy to move that resolution. James Goff, happy to second. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, that's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, item 9, the LTP 2021 mid-process update. There's an additional document been uploaded to the hub on this one quite recently. Peter, what I might ask you to do is just to take us through that attachment or give us any highlights from that attachment and any other matters from this report as well that you want to highlight.
Sure, thank you. Look, we're about to go into the crunchy part of the LTP. Between now and December is the tough bit. The objective is always, as you'll recall, to finish the year at Christmas with a broadly acceptable draft. So maybe not every last detail pinned down, but a draft LTP you can live with, because the wheels turn very quickly after that into February and the adoption of a draft. So between now and early December, late November, the process is set out here, and because you haven't had an opportunity to read it, I'll work through the document. broadly speaking, the aim was to have an entire set of draft documents for you in June, and that was largely achieved despite the lockdown. We did take pause at that point, and rather than diving straight into the activities, which can lead you into the detail very quickly, we've actually taken some weeks there to work with councillors and ELT on big questions across the whole LTP before diving into the silos. So they're global parameter type questions, like, for example, what level of debt will you live with? What level of headroom do you want? What rates increase options do you want to see? What CapEx and OpEx envelopes are going to be acceptable? So getting those discussions underway, that's not a 1 hour meeting, that's taken some time. We're broadly placed with those now to dive into the activities. And attached to this report, you'll see a schedule of briefings for those activities, and they start very soon, like in about 10 days' time. That's been reordered so that the big activities come first. The reason for that is that they may need to circle back. So when you're looking at the big ones like parks, waters, transport, you may want to have that briefing, talk to the manager, look at their plan, and then ask for changes and then have them circle back. That's why they're first cab off the rank now. So just moving through, other factors involved, the external advisory group has been very active in this LTP. They're meeting fortnightly. I understand they provided their first briefing to councillors on the 15th of July. So, and there's another on the 25th or 26th of August from EAG to council. So, you'll see in the report a briefing schedule. This means that if you've got an area of particular interest, you've got a clear heads up on when it will appear. These briefings are basically only an hour or so per activity. Now, bear in mind that some of these activities, like transport, are $150, $160 million in OpEx. So a 1 hour meeting may not be sufficient if you want to make changes and then see them circle back to you. So this is a draft set of schedules. It's taken a lot to pull these time slots together. If you do need extra time, the thing to do will be to highlight it, and we'll work with OCE and the Mayor's Office to make the extra time happen. Your time is at a premium between now and December, so it is a difficult issue logistically. Moving through to the mid-process update. Look, the LTP has actually been running for 8 or 9 months now. It has about 8 or 9 months to go before you get to a draft out for consultation. Overall, we had done well by June with the COVID-19 slippage, but we have fallen a little bit behind now, partly because of the need to take stock of the big global questions around the LTP, and partly because a couple of components are going a little slower than planned, and I'll talk to those later. The co-development process, whereby staff bring you drafts, not final product, you provide advice, they go implement that and maybe circle back to you, that process seems to be working well. It's quite a different approach to the 2018 model. The strategic direction has been strong. The Mayor's letter, or the Councillor's letter, says one of the process aims is to clearly demonstrate that the LTP is giving effect to the strategic priorities. The strategy team has been involved in all the meetings and is represented very strongly in that space. The infrastructure strategy, you had a briefing from yesterday on their most likely scenario and some detail around that. That was well received. However, what we do have to overlay on that are the financial constraints, and they're shaping up as pretty formidable. I'll come back to that when I'm talking about the capital prioritisation. The next step for the infrastructure strategy is to come back with you with more detail on the most likely scenario. And one thing to keep in mind right through this process is that we need to see a strong link from the infrastructure strategy to the capital prioritisation model to the actual capital projects you decide on at the end. That thread needs to run through them. It'll be something that Audit is looking for, and I'll talk about their Audit New Zealand is looking hard at New Zealand councils, this LTP, on about 4 distinct subjects, and I'll get to those in a moment. Financial strategy and activity budgets. The financial strategy was set back by having to do a second annual plan with COVID impacts in it. It's now catching up. We believe we've got enough information from you about the global parameters to know broadly the shape of the financial options. You would have seen Di Brandish yesterday presenting a single slide with options, some of which were shaded red as in not desirable, and others that are various shades of green to say, look, this is what you could do. It's important that you keep that slide in mind because it contains a combination of information so that you're seeing both CapEx, OpEx, rates increase all in one line as a recipe rather than seeing a single piece of information, which in this instance is not very helpful. So that slide is going to be coming at you again and again as to keep a very clear eye on the financial constraints around capital and OpEx. The other area where we've had some issues is in the savings themselves. There's been a lot of research done through the root and branch review, translating that to tangible savings, as in this would yield 400k, for example. That work has not appeared yet, and so that's a little bit concerning about the project. The activities will start to come at you in, as I said, about 10 to 12 days. So before they do, though, I need to frame the process. Managers have built those over a period of many months, surrounded by support staff from finance, IT, strategy, and so forth. By the time those activity plans get to you, they will have been worked through at a team level, signed off by the manager and the general manager. They will also have been to ELT for discussion, along with the savings options that are available. So they're not coming to you from the shop floor, so to speak. They'll be coming to you from a point of having been through a lot of filters. However, that doesn't mean they're final, locked down, cemented in place product. If you have feedback and changes to make, that's why they're scheduled early so that we can return them to you to see those changes. We've also provided a lot of guidance to activity managers on levels of service. There are too many. They need to be sharper, but without losing transparency. Again, that's a co-development process, so we'll be looking for a steer from you as well as a steer from staff to you. Asset management plans are available and will be part of this LTP for the first time on a transparent basis. They've probably suffered from not having strong financial parameters in their development, so the capital prioritisation process has to pick that up. At the moment, there is simply too much capital for us to afford or deliver, but bringing that line down is a key part of the LTP. You will recall that yesterday Carolyn presented, I think, the magma diagram as part of the options around capital. When you see that next, it will have been brought down to a more affordable level, and we'll have overlaid upon that the financial constraints. So you'll see a series of options around rates and where those rates would fall relative to that diagram. I can tell you that at first glimpse, it looks very much as though the most likely financial scenario falls not that high up the diagram. Meaning that by the time you do renewals and growth, there's not a lot of room above the line. So it'll mean looking hard at what renewals actually mean and whether they are real or not. In terms of community and stakeholder engagement, there's been a lot of work to do it differently from past LTPs. Focus groups, participatory budgeting tools, they're all in place. The Smart Cities people have done a lot of work. So we're ready to have a conversation with the community. There's also a big session with community boards coming up in September, I believe, between you and the boards, where they present their plans. So we're 15th. Thanks, John. So we're poised to do, if you like, pre-consultation engagement more than we ever have before. But we do need a sense of where we're going with this before we have that conversation. In terms of oversight and LTP process review, the project currently has 6 layers of oversight. We have the LTP program group, the ELT, this committee, the external advisory group, Audit and Risk Management, and Audit New Zealand, all providing oversight. one issue for me in terms of project management is that oversight is not a review at the end. It's actually active during the in flight, which means that it's actually eating into the availability of time to do the project. So we're trying to provide similar information to all those layers rather than bespoke 6 different sets of interviews and documents and so forth. The key one, of course, is Audit New Zealand, because they are the ones who have the legal mandate to review how we do the process, and they're the ones who publish an opinion on that, and it's part of our LTP. In other words, it's a public document. So they're really the ones to keep an eye on in terms of how this goes. So to summarise, key risks to the project. The financial strategy is catching up after the COVID impacts. We feel that we're on top of the parameters and choices now, and so the financial strategy needs to move ahead very quickly to catch up to the infrastructure strategy. Savings options need to accelerate more quickly. We need to make sure that capital prioritisation shows the financial constraints overlaid on the capital program, so that when you decide that that's an affordable and deliverable program, you're aware of the financial impacts and the links between capital and rates increases. And that's essentially the key areas of risk, is making sure that we've got the savings identified, and that when you see, for example, capital, you understand the financial constraints around it. And that when you review the activities, the changes you make can circle back to you in time.
So, Peter, thank you very much indeed for that very comprehensive walkthrough. One of the purposes of putting this report in front of us on a monthly basis is to raise any red flags that there might be. And I hear, despite we've largely kept up, despite the COVID-19 situation and despite the rework of the annual plan, and I'd like to acknowledge all the work that people have done to keep up with the LTP at the same time as all of that additional work was done for the annual plan. It sounds as though there are a couple of red flags that are being raised, particularly around the prioritisation of the capital programme, the realistic prioritisation of the capital programme, bearing in mind funding constraints and capacity constraints, and possibly around the savings from the zero-based budget approach. Are they on track, or when would we expect to have those on track? Because they're both key components that need to fold into the timely development of the whole package. So I wouldn't mind you making some comments on both of those areas of work if you're able to.
They're not irredeemably off track. We're in a position where it would have been ideal to have some of that stuff earlier. But having said that, it's more up to date now. And the situation, as you'll appreciate, is fluid. I mean, things could change today. What it's going to basically mean is, and there's probably a stages of grief process here, is that when we look at the parameters the councillors have put down around rates increases, the impact of that on both OPEX and CAPEX means that it will simply be a lot less than it was. And we've not worked through a process before of being that tight and disciplined around OPEX and CAPEX. There's always been a lot more room to move, the option of moving something around, a dividend appears, something positive happens. Virtually none of those rabbits are going to appear from those hats. So in terms of an affordable and deliverable capital program, it'll mean a lot of discipline about what goes in it, and a lot of questions about, is that an improved level of service or just our current level of service? Is it a renewal that needs to happen, or is it a renewal that could happen 5 years further out? So we're going to need to turn those rocks over to understand what a deliverable and affordable program is. And the same goes for the savings in OPEX. Will the organisation have sufficient capacity to deliver the service if we make savings at such and such a level? So in other words, it sounds like we have a lot of time between now and November, but actually to ask those questions and answer them, we don't.
So they're two areas of work that I'd suggest we need to land and get across as quickly as possible. realising that both are likely to have a number of iterations and are likely to take some time to land as well. So I guess, coming back to my comment about the purpose of this report being to raise some red flags, they're two areas that we'll want to keep a tight focus on and that we'll want to get ahead of quite quickly, I think it's fair to say.
Absolutely.
All right, so thank you for highlighting those. Yeah, let's just keep an eye on that. Now, are there any other questions that people wanted to raise? Sam?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. And probably just one thing in terms of the we talked about the LTP parameters, so we've got to work through the capital program and the OPEX savings. One of the things that was flagged a while ago, and it may be a question for the team, was around understanding more the local government inflation and getting a better context of that, because looking at the parameters, I still just sort of dispute where that's at. In terms of feeding that back to us, when will that come, do you know, or when is that available?
Look, I did do, after our discussion, I did do some homework on it, and to quickly round it back for everybody, the local government cost index for last year was sitting at 2.7%, and you raised some questions about that. So I got the team to go back and dig into it a bit. Those figures come from Burl, so that's the sort of benchmark that councils are meant to use. But they include both a public and private sector component around increases. So because councils pay a lot of private sector people, there's a private sector pay increase component to that 2.7. Now, there's a very detailed document that comes from central government around how this is calculated and so forth. I've got that, and I'll get it to you.
And the Burl update's due in October.
And as Di says, the Burl update is due in October. So we'll have a more accurate picture of 2020 view of the world, and whether that 2.7 has gone up or down or stayed. But the science behind it is spelt out pretty clearly over about 6 or 7 pages.
Right.
And so it isn't purely a public sector view of the world. Because we pay earth movers and so forth from the private sector, that's built into those figures.
Right.
I'll get the detail to you.
That'd be really useful. And I guess just probably following on a bit from Andrew's one around the OPEX side of it again. So how are we going to, what's the best way to give the public oversight in terms of looking at how we do make those savings? So there's obviously the significant CapEx component, but looking at how we drill into that, I mean, I know they'll have a chance to make a submission, but how are we going to communicate that over the coming months? Because I think that's sort of something that's raised constantly with us.
Well, I mean, the stock answer is that the consultation document needs to spell out exactly what the savings options are and what preferred options council's taken. But that's all a bit late in terms of being a draft in February. If you wanted to talk or engage with the community earlier, there are mechanisms that the engagement team have built, but they don't have content yet because the content doesn't really exist. So we could work on a process whereby when you've decided, even on a general consensus basis, that this is where you want to go with certain things, we could engage on that. But that's a process we've never done before. We'd need to think it through. Because you don't want to go out with something that you haven't really got agreement on or worked through.
Yeah. So I guess probably to put it another way, are we looking, when we do go out to that consultation or communicate, are we looking at going out and consulting on, for example, a reduction in staff numbers or a change in activities? Like how specific will that be?
Generally speaking, you would consult on the impact on the community, so the changes in the services they would get rather than the mechanics that sit behind it.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thanks.
All right, thank you. Now I've got a number of other people with questions. I've got Jimmy, Sarah, Anne and Yanni. Jimmy.
Thank you, Chair. On page 80, the long-term plan, the briefing to the elected members. So based on this schedule, looks like the EAG will present from now on, still have 3 times, but last time will be on the 8th of October. It's a final report. Yeah. But if we review this schedule, after 8th of October, still have quite a few activity planned. The staff will present to elect members. My question is whether those ones, minor one, not major one, so should be okay or not?
Look, my understanding of the EAG is that they're not there to review every single activity, and
yes,
that their focus has been on the ones that will be in September, the big activities. But they have split themselves into portfolios, and one of those portfolios is looking at the internal more internal services that are set down for October and onwards.
Yes.
So if they have any findings in that space, that should be part of their final report on the 8th. But their brief wasn't really to review every internal service on an individual basis.
Okay.
So I don't think they see that as their
No
role.
impact.
No.
Okay.
And in their discussions with Dawn, she was very keen to focus them on the big activities and the big issues rather than down in the weeds, as she called it.
Okay, thank you. The other one is the community board. We joined them on either 16 or 17 September. That's only one time, am I right?
That's one time before Christmas, but there's normally there's normally further interaction with the boards before the final LTP. This is really for them to present their community plans.
Okay.
Early enough in the process that those plans actually can join in.
Yes.
Rather than, there's not much point then presenting them after the draft is largely built.
Okay, okay. If that's true, because after they have activity plans, still have some recreation sports, facility, etc., whether they're still eligible. Even now we review, or listen to the staff, but they are eligible to express their concern in a different community board. Am I right?
Yes.
Early stage.
Yes.
Okay,
That's
you.
the point of that, fairly big meeting, is for them to have an early input and express their views on it. By and large, those plans tend to be at a fairly micro level.
Yes.
They're not really global network kind of views of the world.
Yes. Yes.
But if they're early enough, they can be incorporated into the plan. Or we can explain that what they're looking for is already in there.
Yes.
So there's a bit of give and take.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Sarah.
Thanks for that. Just on that capital program, looking at the renewals, what's needed, what's not, do we make sure that the costs of not doing the work are really explicit? So the risk of sweated assets, further financial costs later on, social and environmental costs, those kind of things, they're really explicit in the decision framework?
They have to be because, for example, and I alluded earlier to Audit New Zealand focusing on a couple of key things this LTP across the whole country. One of them is climate change. They're going to want to know how we're giving effect to climate change. And to that end, there is a good webinar by Taylor Tonkin, which I might circulate around to you. We discussed the other day. The letter of expectation is very clear about resilience and how we're giving effect to that, and lastly, risk. So there are a couple of key areas there where we have to say, when we're looking at this stuff, have we passed that lens over it? Are we actually giving effect to it in a meaningful way, or are we just having words and the detail, the implementation isn't there to support it?
Yeah.
So short answer to your question is yes, that lens has to be there when we go through those discussions.
Yeah. But the auditors, they're going to be actually looking at what we're doing, not just that we've passed the lens over it. Is that right? So
yes,
when we're looking at that future, decision making for future generations, they're not just looking that we've passed the lens over it, decided not to do anything. Are they?
No, they'll be looking that firstly there was a process, and secondly that we've actually given effect to it in some kind of meaningful way.
Yeah.
So in other words, in the infrastructure strategy, are there waypoints that talk to climate change? Are there actions? Are there decision points built in around climate change, rather than simply some words at the top?
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Anne and then Yanni. Anne.
Kia ora. Thank you, Peter. The briefing schedules, you should go into events schedule, planning. It's obviously a lot of work's gone into to getting this sorted. And what I just want to be clear about what you want from us as councillors when we come to briefings, apart from our attendance, of course. What would you hope to get from it? Is it just a tick to say, yep, great, or do you want feedback? Do you want questions? What would you like from us?
There are some councillors who've been through this process before. We've done it each LTP since 2005. Essentially, direction and a critical eye. Is this where you want this activity to go? Balancing it against financial constraints.
Yep.
Are these the things you want it to do for the price that you pay? and is it transparent that whether you'll get them or not in the levels of service? So, in other words, are these the right things to be doing? Is this the right cost? And will we see on a transparent basis how well it's performing? They're the key questions. And in some cases, like we have managers who plan these right to a nicety, and you may say that's fine. In others, you may make adjustments. It depends on the quality of the plan and the direction that you as councillors want to go on a policy level. So the answer is it depends.
Right. So it would be good at the beginning of the briefing to actually just have those wee bullet points. This is the purpose. You know, that would be good just to remind us.
Yes.
Also, wondering about community engagement. It's fantastic that you are really working hard on that and how we're going to do that. But I'm wondering how the feedback that we get will feed into the actual process. You know, you kind of alluded to it when you answered Sam's question. We don't want it to become a cynical exercise where people would ask things and then not, you know, it doesn't go anywhere. So how do you see that working?
Well, I'm sort of speaking on behalf of the engagement team here. It's their area rather than mine. But look, their focus is not on a big blank sheet of paper, what do you want kind of question. They want focus groups that represent specific audiences and demographics. They want to put particular decisions to them. You know, there are big discussions to be had on, for example, red zone, take your pick. But it's about targeting the feedback rather than simply saying, what do you want? Because when you ask that broad question, you get stuff that isn't what councils do, for example. It's not that useful. So talking about rates increases would be one thing for the budgeting tool. Talking about specific topical issues for the city would be one for the focus groups and how it impacts them as youth or aged or whatever. So in other words, basically the approach they're going for is targeted rather than blank slate. And in order to do that, they require some kind of steer early on about what the LTP might look like. So the range of rates increases, the kind of big topics, whether we're doing climate change enough, those sorts of things. So in other words, it's garbage in, garbage out. If you ask a fairly specific question, you'll get useful stuff back. If you just say, what do you reckon, you'll get that back.
I think it's really great the way you're trying to bring people along with you in this process, both councillors and community, so appreciate that.
I think there's quite a lot of distraction at the moment, though.
Thank you. Yanni, you've got a question?
Yeah, thank you. Just two questions from me, thank you. The first one is, in terms of the hour-long briefings, are they going to include Section 70A reviews? And are they also going to be, when are they going to be available? When is the information attached to those briefings going to be made available to us as councillors beforehand to digest? Thank you. That's the first question.
If a 17A exists for the activity, it will come with the activity plan. So the answer to that is yes, if it exists. Not all activities have a 17A. In terms of availability, all of these plans, activity plans and asset plans, have been on Big Tin Can since March. But in terms of giving you a specific heads up, we're looking at somewhere between 7 and 10 days before the meeting, so that you've got an opportunity to go through the plan, compose your questions and be ready for the briefing. So what we're absolutely trying to avoid is that the thing gets posted 2 days before and you haven't had time to read it.
Yeah, no, that's great. So if I, for example, the Linwood Library and the library's plan and the Section 70A, there's a place in our Big Tin Can now where I can go and read all that information and be prepared for the hour briefing.
Certainly the activity and asset plans are, if a 17A is not complete, I don't know if it will be available because it's not complete. But anything that we've got that exists will be there.
Okay. So if a 17A is not complete, that raises another question, then what's the point in having the briefing ahead of it?
Well, that's a good question, but the point is that 17As were due in June.
Okay.
So it would be good, and I realise you've got another question, Yanni, I'll come back to you in just a moment. It would be good where that's the case for us to know that at the time we're having the meeting. If there is a 17A that's still in flight, it would be good to know where that's it. It would be good to get any of those 17As completed prior, obviously, to those sessions if we possibly can, or at least get an update on where they're at if they're in a draft form. And I guess everything that Yanni has asked about Section 17A reviews would also relate to any service reviews that are going on as well, which are not formal 17As, but there's a service review in flight or being completed as well.
Yes, understood.
So, yeah, if we can fold that into the relevant briefings, that would be good, and obviously anticipating that there'll be questions about those where it's known that there are 17A reviews or service reviews going on, because, yeah, little point in having that work done if we're not going to have the ability to take it into account for the LTP.
Sure.
All right, Yanni, your next question?
Yeah, there seems to be a big gap, which is around development contributions. So I was just trying to understand, I've looked at the schedule, I can't see any briefing on development contribution policy and projects. I was just trying to get a sense of when we have that discussion, what the time frame is, and how that feeds into all the other strategies that we're having to do as part of this.
Okay.
Thanks.
Two parts to the answer. One I do know the answer to, and that is development contributions were unhooked from the LTP some years ago by legislation. They're no longer a compulsory part of the LTP. Whether we're reviewing them in the same time frame, I would have to go back to the strategy people to see what their timelines are. But there's no obligation to review DCs in parallel with an LTP. No, we've got no one here who can speak to that.
Right.
I would need to talk to the strategy and planning people and find out what their DC review timeline looks like. But
okay, because I think this is, councillors will be, and the acting mayor will be aware, repeatedly raised the issue of looking at our DC's policy, so that areas such as in Phillipstown, where you've got huge intensification and development, none of that money that's being put aside for growth projects is going back there because there's no projects in our annual plan. Yes. And it's like a chicken and egg. We don't review the policy, but we don't have projects on budget, and we never seem to get any funding going from those developments back into the communities that they're impacting on. So I would just really appreciate having a really clear way in which we can consider that. You know, when you look at the DC's project lists, you can see quite clearly an assumption made around what should be funded through DCs and what should be funded through the budgets. And I would find it quite hard to separate that out with a separate process when we look at things like our capital project.
I understand. Look, I'll get a briefing back to you from the strategy people around that. You've touched on really quickly a very important part of the LTP, which is all New Zealand councils are going to be grappling over the next couple of years with what growth looks like. And DCs, of course, are partly predicated on growth. So if you basically forecast your growth too high, you'll have a revenue shortfall because that growth won't happen. And you'll be counting on DC dollars that aren't there. If you go too low, then you won't be getting DCs back that you should. So understanding growth and trying to get a picture of something that even the economists are all completely in disagreement over is going to be a feature of the LTP.
Yeah.
Nobody seems to be able to agree on what growth will be like because of the impacts of COVID and lockdowns and so forth. So, but we need to understand assumptions around growth for our LTP. So I'm just flagging that as one to chew over as we go, because the implication is in the millions. It's not small potatoes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yanni, thanks for raising that. And again, if we can make sure that that is folded into the briefing schedule, it's vital that that strategy and policy work aligns with this and that we can take that into account. And also any thoughts, and I guess it would come with that strategy and policy work around DC catchments as well.
Yes.
So it's the DC projects, the DC catchments, the growth projections, all key areas, particularly around what assumptions we're making and how we might set things up around those assumptions to get best value. So that probably comes back, Peter, to a point that you made earlier in the presentation around the time set aside for briefings. I'm aware in the discussions this morning that we've raised a number of issues that, we're asking for more time rather than less time. If that means that we need to further scan diaries and put a couple of placeholders in for further sessions so that we've got the time that we need, I'd be suggesting that that's something we should do as well.
Look, I think that would be extremely prudent because we haven't even touched on the Two Waters movement either, which is going to introduce other complexities into the LTP.
Yeah, I'd be suggesting that we put some further placeholders in. It looks as though we're going to be needing more time rather than less time, just with those issues that have been raised this morning.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any further questions? All right, so we've got a resolution in front of us, which again I'm happy to move. Do I have a seconder? Jimmy Chen. Any debate? All those in favour say aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
So then we move on to the next report, which is the corporate finance report for the period ending 30th of June. So Diane Brandish. Diane, welcome to the table. If we can get your update on this, please. And then there's obviously further information to be presented to the 3rd of September meeting, to the next meeting as well.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, councillors. This is the report which used to come to you quarterly, and as we say within the report, we did not give you the March update because at that point you were only asking for really important ones, and this didn't fall into that category. So this is the 6-month update, and I'm happy to take any questions. It's in the same format as previously, although we have added a bit at the end about insurance because we were aware that we didn't actually ever report you on our ongoing insurance claims as opposed to the insurance placement. So if you have any questions, I could give you an update perhaps before you ask that, and that is 3.3, where we talk about the amounts of that we'd had under the deferral scheme. That was the figures as at the end of June. That has now increased marginally from 6.7 to 6.8. 1,300 businesses, 830 residents applied, another 130. When we asked for further information, didn't send it through. 8 applicants so far under the second proposal, which is to defer the Q1 rates for up to 2 years.
So if I can just flag, Di, that's likely to be an area of interest as we get further iterations of this report. We'll be wanting to keep an eye on the uptake around the provisions that we've put in place, and we'd also be looking for any commentary around the effectiveness of the provisions that we've put in place as well.
Yes, I appreciate that, and as I said, so far only 8 people have applied. I could see that there may not be some initially because the government is still providing a lot of support, but that it's not like a once-only opportunity. It's people could apply later in the year if the government stop some of the funding they're providing to businesses. We may get more response then, but we'll certainly keep you informed.
Yeah, and certainly whilst we remain hopeful about the performance of our local economy, we see just from the fact that we're having a socially distanced meeting this morning, we are in a very dynamic situation at the moment, and we'll be very keen to monitor all of the effects of whatever situation that we're in, yes, including the effect on the uptake of the hardship provisions and also on debt in general. So, I think it's likely to be an area of continued focus.
Okay, well, I am presenting another paper at the September meeting, and I could give you a verbal update at the same time on what's happened with debtors if that's...
If we can take that as an area that we'd like to see continually highlighted, certainly in the short term, I think that would be a good approach.
Okay,
Thank you. Any questions for Diane on this report? No questions? All right, so again, I'm happy to move the recommendations in front of us. Sam MacDonald, happy to second. All those in favour say aye. Against, that's carried. Thank you very much.
And Mr Chair, before I disappear, would you like a quick update on the results for the end of June, which you did ask me to give you a verbal update as well?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the paper which is coming to you on the 3rd of September, the final result for the year was an operating deficit of 25.9, slightly down on the 28.7 that we had originally projected, and there are carry forwards coming of 13.4 operational and 145.3 capital, no cost within the annual plan because it was money that was included in the annual plan just completed. The main reasons for the change were slightly lower costs as a result of COVID-19 because we responded a little faster, slightly higher dividend from Transwaste. We had a weather contingency that we didn't have to use, and penalties were slightly higher than we'd forecast. So really just a number of small contributors which helped to improve the result. The capital delivered was slightly higher than had been forecast in the quarter before, but still below the level that we budget to rate for. Okay.
All right, so thank you very much indeed for that verbal update, and just reiterating that all of that information will be contained in the report coming in front of us on the 3rd of September at the next meeting. Yes. All right, Diane, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. All right, so now moving to item 11, and Darren, welcome back to the table. This is the Capital Delivery closeout report on Rising Home Homestead, and I guess drawing particular attention to the community outcomes and lessons learned which are contained in attachment B. But I'd welcome your commentary on this report, and then we'll take any questions.
Thank you very much. Another successful delivery from the Heritage Program. We're bringing that program to a close now. This facility opened just on a year ago. Refurbishment and rebuild of the Rising Home Community Centre. As you'd mentioned, the community outcomes on this were quite significant. The facility was residential in the upstairs. It was converted to community meeting space, and the feedback from Linda, the director of the user group, she loves this thing. We've as a council delivered a great outcome. The lessons learnt also we've added that for you to have a look at. We've taken all of those lessons onto every other project we do, and I guess take it as read. Richie's here if there's any particular questions pertinent to this project as such, but we'll be bringing a number of other closeout reports from the community program I deliver through the coming months. I think the next few months we've got additional smaller suburban projects coming through as well.
Thank you. So questions on deconstruction of some of the building elements. So this is in the attachment B, what did not go well, item 2. On deconstruction of some of the building elements, areas of the building were found to be substandard in relation to current building codes, and this affected the budget. Richie, you might have a comment on this. I'm guessing that this is not unusual when we're looking at buildings of this type and nature, but to what extent do we build that into contingencies or into our expectations?
Well, it's very difficult. I mean, I guess the biggest lessons learned throughout the whole program is the intrusive investigation. So we had to get a resource consent, and we were limited by what we cut in and had a look at inside the building itself. We've learnt through the process that the more we investigate at that stage, the more we know about the building structure. So we get a lot of surprises when we take linings off and everything else, as we have done for the last 8 or so years.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Sarah.
No question, just a huge thank you. I went to the Rising Home AGM just a couple of weeks ago, and when you look at the enormous list of community activities and things that go on in that building and that site, it is just huge for that strengthening communities, connectedness, further education, a whole range of things. And they were incredibly complimentary about the interactions they've had with staff and the building and the results. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tim.
Yeah, look, Darren and Richie, thank you. I'll just reiterate what Sarah said, and especially Richie, you also led the Old Stone House in Crowcroft. You know, these buildings are really hard to restore, but you do an outstanding job. I started attending Rising Home when I was 3, when a group of us were dropped off by our mothers so they could apparently play tennis, but I think they went off and had a gin, but we won't go there. But look, thank you so much. It's outstanding. It's a heart to that community, as Sarah was saying, so thank you.
All right, so just sticking with questions for the moment, are there any further questions for staff? All right, that's fine. So if I can have a mover for this one. So Sarah will move, Jake will second. Is there any debate on this? I would just reiterate the comments that have been made. This is one of a number of buildings that Darren and Richie, I know you've both been very involved with over a number of years. Older buildings which have got their own complications, but buildings which are, absolutely valued by the communities that they serve and the communities that use them. And I know there's a huge level of appreciation, the community that uses this building, but there are a number of other examples all around the city of buildings that have formed part of this wider programme. That have been complicated, that in some ways have been far more difficult than we expected, but where the appreciation from the community that these buildings are back in use is, absolutely obvious. So thanks very much indeed for the work that you've done. Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, so next we move to item 11, the Christchurch Agency for Energy Trust, CAFE. Now, my understanding is that there's a presentation, and Pauline, you'd like to make some comments as the chair of this organisation. So you've noted a conflict in terms of this meeting, but of course that gives you the ability to present in your role as the chair of this organisation rather than a member of the committee participating in this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning. So I was going to give you a brief overview of the projects that received the Christchurch Energy Grant from CAFE. So in total, near on $2.2 million of grants were allocated over around about 6 years to a range of projects, which I'll briefly go through. So the first on the list was the community LED lighting upgrades. So that was implemented through the Community Energy Action Charitable Trust, and they put LED installations in there. To date, around about 165 houses and over 2,000 lights have gone in. And at the same time, installation of those homes. And low-income homes, deprivation levels, and community services card holders, there was criteria. Also, there was a replacement project with the Christchurch City Mission with homes. Some other projects, artesian ground source heat pump systems being implemented in the rebuild, basically, time. At the Arts Centre of Christchurch, over the road at the West End with the Christchurch District Energy Company, and also Ngā Tahu property connecting up to that system, and the terrace also have artesian ground source heat pump systems. So quite a success in getting that efficient technology in across the city. There's a commercial photovoltaic panel system on the West End. Just if you're up on the 6th floor, have a look out there, you'll see a panel system, commercial size panel system on the top of that roof to support the 2 office buildings over the road. You'll remember this one, that the CAFE supported charging infrastructure towards the 100% battery electric car sharing scheme, which is now called Zilch. Another significant program, CAFE supported 3 100% battery electric buses on the route from the airport to the bus interchange. That was really ground-leading in New Zealand, because it was, I understand, the first bus service that was totally battery electric. Other jurisdictions were putting in trials and whatnot. This is an actual service in high profile, and that was launched in July last year. Battery electric aircraft, still a bit under the radar because it's going to be officially launched. You'll hear about this later in the year and get some invites to come along to this. This is the first of its kind in New Zealand, a battery electric aircraft. So CAFE supported that through some funds towards charging infrastructure. Electric vehicle charging infrastructure, this was a big project, and that was basically working with business property owners to put in charging infrastructure for the public. And here's some quick photos of that at placemakers. You can see the pictures there of the charging and the signage. And part of this was to keep the signage consistent. Christchurch City Council, we developed that signage and got that through NZTA. So that's the national signage for battery electric vehicle charging. Antarctic Centre there, and there the airport. So the CAFE supported 59 charging sockets across the city at 18 sites, and you'll recognise a number of those sites there, and there was some more over the page. So these projects are these electric vehicle charging projects and the battery electric vehicle support projects very much assisted our application to awards, and they were significant in regards to, we got recognised as Christchurch as these are the two awards Len's put up there, in both 2017, 2019, we're the most EV friendly Town of the Year award. So Christchurch were doing a lot, but this cafe support to all those electric projects were very, very important to getting those awards when I put us in for that application. Just to end with, times are changing, even the Empire is supporting battery electric vehicles. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much indeed. Pauline, I'd invite some comments from you as the chair of the trust.
Oh, thank you very much, and thanks for that presentation, Kevin and Len. Yeah, well, look, the cafe was actually, the Christchurch Agency for Energy Trust was set up in 2010, and we've dissolved it in, I think, June 2020 this year. So it was originally funded from carbon credits that were gained from the Burwood landfill gas. And the purpose of the trust was to promote energy efficiency, energy awareness, awareness of renewable energy, and ultimately the reduction of carbon emissions. And post-quake, the trust focused on the opportunity provided by the rebuild to encourage renewable energy within the CBD, particularly in large buildings and mainly using ground-sourced heat pumps. And that was what we set aside was a pot called the Christchurch Energy Grants, and that was about 1.8 million in that scheme. And Cafe would fund up to 30% of a project, not all of it, up to 30% and up to 300k. So it was really an incentivisation to actually embrace this renewable energy, and I think we're all really proud of that. I really want to thank the people involved at the time, and I think Bob Parker was involved at the beginning and quite a few other people who actually had the foresight to set this trust up with that money, because it's all coming to fruition now when we realise even more how important carbon reductions are and energy efficiency. We got to a point where we amended the deed to broaden the criteria for which the grants could be made without altering the purpose or the charitable status. So you've heard about all the energy grants and the big schemes that we put money into, but we also managed to branch out into things like the LED lighting, the electric air trial, and the U-Go and the chargers and the buses, and also the Methodist missions with their... that was a very small allocation to them, I think, just to do the light bulb changing, whereas the Canterbury Energy Action were actually putting in total LED units. Of course, it is a charitable trust, so everyone involved was there in a voluntary capacity. I'd particularly like to thank Richard Briggs from ECA and Stephen Godfrey from Orion, who put in a considerable amount of time and offered their expertise around the board table. Councillor Ben Livingston, who was involved until last year, and more recently Councillor Mike Davidson, as the two, along with me, as the two council reps on that trust, and also all the council staff for their support. Sam there, sitting there, and Henry in the back there. It's been quite a lot of meetings at times. I think for a while there we were meeting monthly, and particularly, of course, Kevin Crutchley there, you know, because Kevin, you're so passionate about this. You're so passionate about energy conservation, innovation, all that stuff, and it's your manner in going out and actually talking people into taking the plunge and doing these sorts of things, which were years ago more cutting edge. And I think you talked a lot of people into going down this path because of the way you've handled it. So it's been a complex process as well, because these applications were not quick. They'd have to actually pitch for them and get approval. Then we would have to agree as a board to allocate the funds, and then the project would have to be well along the path before we actually allocated any of that funding. So it's been a real journey, and it's been a privilege to have been involved in that trust. And of course, I say we've wound it up now with a small amount left that we agreed to contribute to the Mayor's Welfare Fund. So, and I think having those awards there actually shows that it has done something for Christchurch City. We are wanting to be a clean, green city, and as I say, it's just been wonderful to be involved in that. So thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you. So we've got a recommendation in front of us. Oh, first of all, are there any questions? Aaron.
Yeah, I just had one, and it was around the photos. Firstly, the last one of Darth Vader is about 6 or 8 inches too short and probably 50 kilos light. That's a very small Darth Vader, let's be honest. And that Stormtrooper's a bit on the light side as well. They do come from Polynesian pedigree. Django Fett, played by the New Zealander, Mr. Morrison. The other ones, of all the parking spots, can we not use photos where someone's actually charging? I mean, it's like when we do a cycleway and there's no one on a bike. It's just a bad sell. So I note that
No pun intended.
no one's actually using them.
Unfortunately, we moved the cars to show the signage.
Oh, did you?
Yes,
Really?
sorry. Well, next time we'll leave the cars in place.
Did you actually move the cars?
To get the signage right.
A lot of those pictures were taken from the installer, and they've just gone in.
Yeah.
And Len's actually right, on some sites on council we want to have the cars away so we can show off the signage, because around the country they're not always following that NZTA signage on the ground. So it was just by chance when the airport took that shot and so forth. So,
It's just by
but we
chance
do
it
need
was
some
in.
good shots. We've got one in Sumner with one charging up.
Yeah, that's why we're a council, not an ad agency, because normally when you're selling a product, you show it in use.
We wanted to show you the charges and the signage and their glory.
Understood. Thank you.
Cheers.
Okay, no further questions. James.
Kia ora, I just want to put my oar in here. Thank you for putting some funding towards zilch, actually, because I'm a member of the club and use an electric car every day or partially because of this funding. So thank you. Money well spent.
All right. So
And I just had one question as well, Andrew.
Sorry. Okay. Yep. Go ahead.
Thanks. Thank you. I mean, interesting to look at where the money's been spent. I guess also to think about where it hasn't in terms of things like social housing and council facilities. But my understanding, because it was a trust, we were unable to use that money for council projects. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. Just in terms of the electric buses, which they're not specifically council, but obviously one of our companies owns them. Have we had any update? I mean, it would just seem a real shame that we've invested that money, and I understand they've been really well. I think Redbus said that they had a 10% increase in patronage for using the electric buses. Has there been any discussions with Redbus about either acquiring them or keeping them in use in the city?
There will be a report coming from Redbus as part of the agreement, just on how it's all gone with those brand new buses and patronage and all those sorts of things. So we're really looking forward to that report, because we think we might find some interesting findings. And when you have brand new buses, and let alone battery electric buses operating on a route, what does that do to patronage? So that will come. Yep.
Will that come to the full council or to the Transport Committee of Council?
I'm not sure where it would go. It's part of the requirements to go to the trust, but I think the information that comes out of that will be of importance, I think, for Transport to have a look at, and ECAN to have a look at, because ECAN also supported that project.
And anything coming out of that we might want to pick up with CCHL from a Redbus viewpoint, obviously that could be a trigger for that further conversation.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
Yeah, great. Thank you, and thank you for all the work that you've done.
All right, thank you. Now, do I have a mover for these recommendations? Melanie will move, and a seconder. Jimmy Chen will second. Is there any debate? Pauline, I'd like to just reiterate the comments that you've made. Clearly, between 2010 and now, this organisation has made a difference. Funds have been distributed in a way that has made a difference. Certainly, picking up the comment was made around those EV charging stations. Whilst the photos may have shown them not in use, I think anecdotally, as we move around the city, we see that those are very well used, increasingly well used, I think it's fair to say. But clearly the 2.2 million distributed has made a difference, and really just reiterating thanks to everybody that's been involved over the years in achieving what this trust has achieved, and obviously in passing these resolutions today, the small amount of residual funding transfers to the Mayor's Welfare Fund, where I'm sure that'll also be well used. So just noting the conflict on the part of Pauline as the chair of the trust and of Anne Galloway and Yanni as trustees of the Mayor's Welfare Fund, I'll now put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. All right, so now we move to item 13. These are the final statements of intent for a number of council-controlled organisations. So, Linda, I don't know whether there's any comment that you wanted to make on these statements of intent. We can take the report as read.
There really isn't much to say on them. They're all very tidy. They all reflect the COVID implications. The only two things I suppose that I was thinking of raising was that we're proposing that Civic Building Limited no longer reports quarterly. The activities are straightforward. There's very little variation from quarter to quarter, and we think that half yearly is adequate. I did want to point out also that the LGFA has relaxed its borrowing covenants to assist local authorities with strong credit ratings to borrow to fund infrastructure investment. And that's really all I was going to raise.
Yeah, so the change to the LGFA covenants formed part of our discussion on the annual plan in particular, and in fact fed into the options that were put out into the consultation document. So that decision, of course, as we reported in the annual plan discussions, has been made. So in terms of the change to civic building, is there a resolution that we need to pass there?
Yes, and the resolution is in here, up on the screen.
So number 2 notes the results of the... Is this the same as I've got here? Oh, here we go. So we've got, agrees that civic building is not required to provide quarterly performance reports to the council, continues to meet the Local Government Act reporting requirements for annual and half-year reporting. So that's there. All right, great. So... can I have a mover then? Oh, are there any questions on these reports for Linda before we get to moving them? Aaron?
Yeah, just quickly, Linda, did you just say that the increase in borrowing was for investing in infrastructure?
Oh, a lot of it will be for investing in infrastructure, but
but it's not strictly for that.
No,
so you are allowed to pay your groceries.
Well, no, I don't think local authorities will be borrowing to pay for groceries.
Okay.
But in theory. I mean, ordinarily you borrow to fund capital.
Yeah.
For operating.
Yeah, infrastructure projects, not just to offset your rates increase.
Right.
Correct. Checking.
Are there any further questions?
Yeah, I just had one. Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, just in regards to Civic Building Limited, like obviously the statement of intent is pretty much just bread and butter. It's the same every year. Nothing really changes. But my understanding is there was work going on around looking at this arrangement, and there's nothing reflected in here that's happening.
I can talk to that.
This is around Civic Building Limited. Yeah,
the activities of the board basically will reflect their understanding, the independence of the board will understand their plans on what they're doing. They have been in negotiations with council on the level of rent that's paid, but that's all subject to the commercial leasing arrangements that are in place at the moment. which goes for a further 14 years. The civic building is also in consultation with its partner, Ngaitahu Properties Limited, on options what this building could do. So once the details of all of that come forward, we'll be, civic building will logically present a paper to council as the key shareholder on what it's planning to do. It's not mentioned in the SOI for the particular reason that this is potentially commercially sensitive activities which the board of directors believe is best kept with the joint venture partner at this point in time.
Right, okay. So, I mean, given what we heard yesterday around some of the costs of this, I just don't understand when we as a council ever look at the performance of this relationship.
All right, so I can answer that question. There's a briefing coming, and if there are further decisions to be made, there'll be papers will be coming in front of council to support those decisions at that time. So the information that you're asking for in this meeting will be the subject of a future briefing.
But sorry, the statement of intent sets out what they're going to do next year, and there's nothing in here that would talk about looking at the arrangements.
Well, looking at the arrangements is an operational issue. The amount of rent you pay, the contracts that you engage in is operational, and it doesn't actually affect the activities and scope.
Bruce, I might invite you to the table. Noting that this, the broad matter that has been raised will be the subject of a future briefing when we're ready.
Yes.
Is there some comment that you want to make?
Yeah, correct. We tentatively penciled in a briefing for the 1st of September. Excuse me. Sorry, I ran up the stairs to get here. The matters that are being raised are matters for council as the tenant rather than CBL as a part owner. But council as a tenant is working through those. And as I say, briefing's coming. Excuse me.
Yep, that's great. And that brings a whole new meaning to take some exercise in your local area.
Right.
Great. No, thanks for...
Okay, so...
Thanks for joining the meeting. It's great.
So basically, it's business as usual in terms of this company, and we just wait to see operationally what we do as a council.
Correct.
I guess the question is, at what point would we consider reviewing this company in terms of its activities and how it's operating if it wasn't giving us a good result as a shareholder?
So that's more of a question for CBL as a company.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that the council can request CBL an update, but any negotiations that Civic Buildings enters into will basically be subject to some commercial advice that has to come from independent parties. We'll have to make sure independent parties are well aware of what that ends up being, and that all forms part of a final decision for council and for CBL independently, one on the relationship and one with Ngaitahu.
Right. And just a final question in this one. Was there any consideration of relief for the COVID-19 impacts? Like other, any discussion like what we've done with our people that have leases through council?
So I can advise the JV did offer relief to their smaller tenants who couldn't afford to carry through, and that has been done. But they didn't offer relief to council as a tenant, nor did we believe that it was necessarily appropriate to seek it in the circumstances. Given that we were continuing to access the building throughout, even at level 4, particularly for our essential staff, and we weren't restricted in that sense.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Nothing further, Yanni?
No, that's fine.
That's great. Thank you very much. All right. So any further questions? Can I have a mover for these statements of intent? Tim Scandrett, seconded Pauline Cotter. Any debate? All those in favour say aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you. All right, so now we move to item 14, sundry reporting, council-controlled organisations. Now, Linda, you just want to make some comment on the purpose of this report?
Sure. So the purpose really is to catch up on a few items that weren't reported due to the COVID lockdown. They weren't of sufficient note to push them through when other issues were prevailing. So I have in this report 2 half-year reports, one from the Rod Donald Banks Peninsula Trust and one from Central Plains Water Trust. The information is now well dated, and they will be shortly reporting annual results. The one comment I would make is that, well, 2 comments. One is that the Central Plains Water Trust is fully funded by the water company and it's just administrative cost. There's nothing to see there. And the Rod Donald Banks Peninsula Trust has actually spent a lot less than it expected, drawn down from its trust fund, because it's in a property acquisition engagement that hasn't been completed yet.
Yeah.
And so that's the 2 half-year reports. So they went to December 2019, and the 2 Q3 performance reports equally have. There's nothing to see here either. They're just the ongoing business, the LGFA's special general meeting results about the borrowing, which we've already discussed. LGFA's target is pretty much on target. Don't think I can add anything more than that.
All right, so this really is just playing catch-up on reports that would have otherwise come to us much earlier but didn't because they were not considered urgent during the COVID-19 period.
Yeah.
That's fine, thank you. So Tim's happy to move these. Do I have a seconder? Sarah Templeton. All those in favour say aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. Now this is the point at which I vacate the chair and Sam will come into the chair as deputy. To deal with the next 2 items, 15 and 16. So we'll just do that.
Cool, thank you all. Great. Joe, do you want to kick it, or Linda, do you want to kick it off and then give us a short rundown, and then if there's any questions we can go through them?
Yeah. Kia ora koutou. I will acknowledge that Linda has presented a thorough and detailed paper for consideration by members, so I'll just speak to some of the summary points and then happy to answer any questions. But firstly, I wanted to acknowledge the support of members over the last 6 months. It's been a hugely challenging period as we've all collectively navigated our post-COVID response, and as we've seen with the news overnight, this continues to be a highly dynamic situation. To give you an indication of the kind of challenge that we're facing, we've done a quick calculation this morning of the likely impact on the Canterbury and Christchurch economy if we had to move back into level 3. And currently, based on our estimates, around $22 million is spent in retail spend within the Canterbury economy per day, compared to just $10 million if we are to move to level 3. So there's a significant impact if we are to move levels. So it's in the interest of everybody that we respond swiftly. We've seen the government move swiftly overnight, but that we support that across our community also. COVID has required a complete re-evaluation of Christchurch NZ's work programme, and we're grateful for the extension of time to enable us also to rework our statement of intent so that we can capture the necessary response within that. As you'll see within the document, our work programme for the coming year is designed to deliver directly to the Otatahi socio-economic COVID response plan. There's 3 horizons that we're working within. There's firstly respond, recover and then reposition, and there's several core work streams within that which navigate from business survival and job protection through to a transition of the economy for the future. We workshopped with elected members as we were preparing this document, and that workshopping around inclusive prosperity was enormously helpful in terms of informing our statement of intent and also the socio-economic recovery plan and our work programme that supports that. And you'll see within both our statement of intent and in time also within our work programme that there are a number of actions that are designed to support the prosperity of our most vulnerable members within our community, including young school leavers, Māori and the recently unemployed. You'll also see within our statement of intent a commitment to meaningful measures that protect and grow decent work, and that captures our commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals also. But what hasn't changed is our purpose and mission. We remain committed and steadfast in our approach to these, our purpose being to sustainably grow the economy to the benefit of Ōtautahi Christchurch, and our mission being to ignite bold ambition for our community. You'll see that there are a number of priorities to grow high-value decent work, the scale of the economy, to improve the resilience and competitiveness of our businesses, to support work in our community, and to improve the perception of Christchurch. I've already reflected that we are committed to supporting the UN Sustainable Development Goals, but also the New Zealand Living Standards Framework and the Christchurch community outcomes, which are endorsed by this council. We are also utterly supportive of the development of the Greater Christchurch 2050 strategic framework, because we believe that this will help set the aspiration for our community and some shared and aligned commitment to targets across the sub-region. And we thank this council for its commitment to that piece of work to this point. I'll just reflect briefly on our finances, because our financial position has changed dramatically as a consequence of COVID-19. We have accepted a fall in council funding for the coming year, and we are happy to have support of that on behalf of our community, and we acknowledge the significant financial challenges that this council is facing. We've also, however, experienced a significant fall in third-party funding as a consequence of COVID-19, and a number of our partners have been impacted, and that's impacted the way that they partner with us. So we've had to make some significant changes in the way that we run our budget for the coming year. We've reorganised our work program to focus on core recovery functions. We've aggressively managed costs to reduce our expenditure, and we've also utilised our cash reserves to support an operating budget for the coming year. At the same time, we've upweighted activity that will support economic recovery, so business support, business retention and attraction, labour market transition, industry cluster support, and economic research and insights. As a consequence, we've had to hold other budgets steady or reduce other budgets to support and offset in that increase. The other point I will make is we have aggressively managed costs and reduced our personnel costs. We reduced our board fees. I took a salary reduction. We've reduced our headcount where it made sense to do so, and we've applied tight cost controls across the organisation. I am really grateful that our staff have supported that process, and they are absolutely committed to supporting economic recovery for Ōtautahi Christchurch. And the final point I'll make is that we absolutely love working on behalf of the city, working on your behalf. We are one of your key delivery tools. I'm really grateful for that opportunity, and I'm really looking forward to the year ahead and continuing to support all of you and our residents. Kia ora koutou.
Great, thank you. Linda, do you want to add anything?
Yes, I would like to take the opportunity just to speak to what a statement of intent is actually intended to do. It is not a document that details activities right down to work programs and tasks and functions. It is a high-level statement of the intent of the organisation to deliver against outcomes that are scoped within the statement. It has accountability measures and the programs that feed up into those measures, and their statement of intent that sit with the organisation and any other parties who are contributing to that piece of work.
Cool. Any questions? Oh, Mel?
Yes.
Oh, hang on, Yanni. Melanie first, and then Yanni.
You mentioned about youth and the Maori and something else. Could you tell us a little bit about what your plans are there?
Yeah, so as Linda reflected, the statement of intent isn't the place to capture activity, but I'm happy to outline for members if the chair is supportive of that.
Just
some of the
briefly,
activity.
we're on a bit of a...
Yeah, so we've got 4 main programs that we're currently working on. One is a pilot program in low decile schools within Eastern Christchurch, and that's designed to support young people to be able to move into STEM careers. We're also working with MSD and MB on the development of a skills program, again to identify the way that we can pathway people from unemployment and into employment. We've recently just announced a linked system of innovation incubators, which are designed to support people from unemployment to self-employment, and that's in partnership with ARA, UC and the Ministry of Awesome. And we're engaging with Ngāi Tahu on the Regional Skills Leadership Group and MB again to help grow the aspiration for Māori and create pathways for Māori. So 4 very specific programs this 6 months, and we are continuing to develop these programs to ensure that we support inclusive prosperity.
Thanks, Joe.
Cool. Yanni?
Yeah, thank you. That may have answered some of the question. I was just trying to understand how you're measuring prosperity in the lower socioeconomic areas of the city. And I don't know if you've seen the work that our staff have done around what's happening in terms of the economic trends in local communities. But I just didn't see how you're going to monitor and measure your activities in relation to that prosperity in the areas that are suffering.
Yeah, you sound a little bit like Darth Vader, who we saw in the picture before.
Sorry.
What I'm hearing from your question is you're asking us what we're doing to deliver prosperity to low-income communities. Is that the question?
Yep.
Yeah, so I think, as I outlined, those specific initiatives are designed to explicitly address that, and we are very grateful for the indication from members through the letter of expectation that that is considered a priority, and we'll continue to prioritise that work.
Yeah, and I guess how you're measuring it was the other part.
Yeah. So there are 6 measures within the Statement of Intent that speak specifically to this. Again, happy to run through them, but they are captured there, and they speak to transition into decent work specifically, and job creation, which supports inclusive prosperity.
Perfect, thank you. Anne?
Just a quick question, and it's about going forward from here. Fantastic information, thanks Joanna, and really keen to understand specifically what you're doing in the job creation area with, as you've outlined. So could we have a briefing with you, or about that specifically, about what we're doing in Christchurch to offer employment to our young people, what pathways we're creating, and how we can, as council, support you in that?
Yeah, no, we'd be very grateful for that opportunity. We worked through with Dawn last week a briefing schedule for councillors around the socio-economic recovery plan, and that will have these specific initiatives within it. It's my hope that we can get into your diaries monthly to report against that plan, and we've developed a measurement framework to support that.
That would be fantastic. Almost a workshop, in fact, about employment.
So we can take that offline.
Thanks.
Cool. Any other questions? Jimmy?
I'm only concerned your measurement, the page 260, the 3 years, all those kind of improved perception, etc. Your figure is exactly the same, but because you particularly emphasize in response to the COVID-19, you separate the response, recovery, reposition. This figure should be the gradually increase rather than exact the same. For instance, like your developed Christchurch attractive destination. The first year, like this year, you have 100 inquiry and 30 city bids, 5 product, 35% success rate. The other second year, the same, no any difference. So I just want to know, how did you to focus on, the response or the recovery, etc., rather than reposition?
It's a really fair question. As we assess the targets for the out year, there were a couple of uncertainties that we needed to take into account. One is our long-term funding position. We don't have a great deal of certainty around our funding beyond this year as we move through the LTP process. And then the other is the volatility of COVID. We just simply, at the time we drafted the Statement of Intent, we don't have enough information to really be accurate in those out years. So you can expect to see us update that in the next Statement of Intent.
Okay, but you received all the new revised letter of expectation, am I right?
We received an updated letter of expectation, that's correct, and we responded to that.
The council's new expectation,
Yes, but as you know, we need to now move through the long-term plan process to have certainty around our long-term funding, which covers the out years that you've referred to.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
I'm happy to move this. Do we have a seconder? Tim? Any discussion? All in favour, say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much, Joanna, for that.
Thanks, guys.
Leah, we might do yours now and then we'll break if people want to for 10 minutes. So do you want to come on up for item 16, I think it is? Great. Well, do you want to just talk us through it briefly, and then if there's questions, And I see you've sent through a note this morning to some of Yanni's as well.
Answers Yanni's questions we just got this morning, so I've just answered them.
Yep, perfect.
And firstly, apologies from our board chair and CE. They're in associate director interviews all day yesterday and today, which is another one on our statement of intent requirements. So the statement of intent, final statement of intent, not too much different from the draft you would have received earlier in the year, other than picking up on a couple of the points that we received in the 15th of June letter. And, you know, obviously the big thing is the COVID impact, which, as we've indicated in the statement of intent, and here our forecasts are the group forecast, but as we all saw late last night, this is a moving feast, and while the companies are doing really well at the moment, there is going to be a specific impact on the airport and the port especially, depending on what happens. So.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Leah? Tim?
Yeah, just a couple, and I guess following on from the CIL process with regards to terrace, the information flow here, you know, it states the board aims to keep the council informed of all major development. I guess my concern is what is the no surprises, and I know it was thrown at us because of the possibility of being made public prior to any planned media process. But my understanding was also that the planned process for CIL and CCHL to inform the council was going to be 2 weeks following the annual plan. So I'm just wondering, I'm dissatisfied, I guess, with in the statement of intent, the actual no surprises. There's nothing here about no surprises. All it's got is information flows, under information flows. So have you got a comment on that? It may be unfair to ask you, and I do apologise, but I guess I'm just stating to my colleagues around the table, I have a real problem with this, and I just wonder how to go forward on this, because we need to go forward with you.
Yep.
Because I see that my fellow colleagues who are elected members on this...
Maybe what we could do, Tim, is on that 1.6, where the staff are going to be doing the letter of expectation for next year soon. We could maybe flag that, Carol, can we? Just as something that, unless you want to address it, but I think you've made your point.
I guess my point is, I think it's maybe less, and I do apologise again, but I think it's probably an issue for the council, because I would like a workshop with, because I see I want to get a relationship with our elected members on these boards, on this particular board, how it operates, because it just seems that they're on the board and there's no feedback. And there's no direction. They're meant to be there to give a flavour.
Yeah, are they questions for Leah, or are they?
Well, it was originally, but I guess it's unfair, and I do think it's unfair to ask you, but it's probably more a question for the chairman of the board.
Carol can pick up.
There's no relationship here.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things there. So yes, have to address it separately, and I will take that feedback back, and it's a conversation that should be had. Just want to clarify one comment that you had at the last bit about your councillors on the CCHL board.
Yep.
They are directors of CCHL.
Yes.
Right. So anything that comes from CCHL as a board has to come as a group. The councillors can't come back and give information because that's not in line with the Companies Act, so just be very clear on that. The no surprises has always been there, and it has always run really well. The balance is always about commercial sensitivity. Thank you. I was thinking I have got it here. Linda's just found it, so the section is in there. So we do regular updates, and when we can release information, we will. My understanding in regards to the environment that you're talking about, it was set there for briefing. Unfortunately, it hit the media just before, and finding that time. But we have to tell you, and from an NZX point of view, things that happen to CCHL, we're also bound by anything that we give. We've got to be careful. We can only give the market and councillors the same thing at the same time. So there is restrictions around that. But I think that was more a unfortunate situation of timing, to be fair. But we will address it in a workshop. That's
good point, Tim.
A question perhaps for the chairman of the board and the CE.
And I'll pass that back to you.
And another one would be, would we be better to have, rather than board members, because they are tied to the rules, being board members, of having observers? Just a question to put out there.
We'll take that off. It's probably not something to do right now. But any other questions?
Yeah, I had one, Sam.
Oh, yep, Yanni.
Cool. Sorry about before. I just got disconnected. So I just, in terms of our letter of expectation, I still don't see where CCHL is addressing looking at prosperity in the lower socioeconomic areas of the city. So I was quite puzzled. I couldn't find anything that actually addressed that in the SOI.
Yeah, so it's addressed in the sense of that we'll work with council and making sure our shareholder alignment that's where the key KPI is. As I said in my email to you earlier, Yanni, I don't know if you've had a chance to get it because I've only just sent it. You know, CCHL's role is managing the commercial entities and enhancing returns to council. But in addition to that, one of the big things, piece of work that Christchurch NZ, Christchurch City Holdings and Council have been working really extensively in the last 3 months is this inclusive framework, growth framework. Now, this is, in my understanding, is one of the key things that is the three joint agencies working really closely, and that, in answer to your question, that is how we believe that this will be worked through to actually get what you're actually asking for.
So all the things that like Auckland does in terms of like the Southern Initiative, like training, enterprise, apprenticeships by using the strength of the council companies, is that being looked at by CCHL with Christchurch NZ?
It will be part of that, but just to clarify that, a lot of our entities do extensive training and apprenticeships and stuff. Kinetics is a big one. CityCare, there's a lot of training initiatives, and each of the entities do a lot of that as well. So, but I think it all needs to come out together as part of that inclusive framework, Yanni.
Yeah, I think it's really important. There's growing evidence that young people in particular, and probably Māori and Pacifica, are going to be hit hardest in terms of the COVID-19, you know, in terms of jobs and employment. And certainly there's parts of the city where that will be much more prevalent. So I think it would be good to have a lot greater visibility about what intentional activities are being done by CCHL to address that. Can I just ask, in terms of the senior executive remuneration, are we able to get an update around what restraint has happened, and also in terms of the reductions that have been either agreed or not agreed?
So every year in the annual reports of all the individual CCTOs, they release as part of their things the CE remuneration packages. That was introduced a couple of years ago. Obviously that's not public yet because they haven't been released. But as I said in my email, you know, these are independent companies. The boards of those independent companies are responsible for the remuneration of their senior executive. And their role is to actually perform for the council and produce returns.
Right.
We have continued, as in our statement of intent, as is in every statement of intent of every subsidiary, about the recognising that they are publicly owned entities, and there is a restraint on those bases.
It just seems that despite the fact that we keep putting the same wording in every year, the salaries are just getting like quite massive, and it just, I don't know. I just wonder, is there anything else we should be doing to try and get on top of the very high salaries for senior executives of our companies, given how much they seem to be going up by? Like, how do we actually get it to a more reasonable level?
You don't have a view? If you don't have a view, that's fine. But.
Well, the view is exactly what we've always said.
Yeah.
They are independent companies. We don't determine. We're a shareholder, not the governance boards. The board of the independent companies are the ones that set the remuneration, and we've continued to give the same message, and there has been restraint. So, yeah.
Cool. Anything else, Yanni?
Right, so in regards to the living wage, we're going to have a workshop in October, and that's only going to be for direct employees, in terms of the cleaners at the airport and the contract.
Yanni, let's just leave that for the workshop. I think it's pretty clear that we are going to kind of work together on it. I think it's far more productive to actually have a decent conversation about it rather than in this setting. So is there anything else you have?
Yeah, no, that's good, man. So no, but just I guess a question of my colleagues around whether we're happy with the senior executive remuneration and whether we need to put more into the statement of intent.
Well, I don't think we'll do that in the SOI, but we can just reinforce it in the letter of expectation. But again, we can, CCHL are coming in, so we can talk through it. But your point's valid, and well, I shouldn't say valid, your point's well made. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, your point's not valid, but it's well made. So, yeah. Okay.
Right.
Any other
Thanks.
questions? No. Okay. Would someone like to move this? Phil would like to move it, and Pauline's happy to second it. Any discussion? No. All in favour say aye. Against? That's carried.
I'm
Great.
going to abstain.
You what?
I will abstain.
You'll abstain. Okay. All right.
Yeah, and I'm against it.
You're against it, Yanni? Okay, great. Thank you very much, Leah, for coming in for that. We'll see you at the workshop. Now, we might, before we have a break, can we just resolve to exclude the public for the last couple of items? So, item 17, resolution to exclude the public. I'm happy to move that. Would someone like to second it? The details are there: Christchurch Foundation, trade debtors, the insurance placement. So, Tim's happy to second it. Yep. All in favour? Against? That's carried. Okay, we'll have a 10-minute break. So if we come back at, come back at 5 to 12, and then we'll get it done.